All right, so to kick things off, we'll start with a topic that we started to touch on last week about amino acid metabolism. And I kind of got into this by asking, why is it that deep in prep, I always end up with like acetone, metallic kind of breath, especially the more depleted you get during the week?
Well, this is like a really nuanced issue, and so I'm hesitant to speak off the cuff because it's not something like that. It's really pretty detailed. But one of the kind of I'll start kind of at the beginning, I guess. So everyone knows protein is thermogenic, meaning like some portion of the protein you eat doesn't get actually used as a protein; it gets converted to other things, which takes energy. There's kind of more to the story. And there's actually someone commented, I think maybe in one of our other videos on YouTube, the actual, if you do like a bomb calorimetry where they just get all the just explode and get all the energy out of a food source, the protein is really like 5.65 calories per gram, not 4. It's like the physiological caloric amount is 4 grams, which is kind of interesting. It doesn't really play in anything because as far as humans are concerned, it's 4 grams. But then beyond that, I was just reading. I always try, like we've talked about first principles in the past, and you try to work through these things. Everything has to make sense. You can't create energy. Energy is there, and that's it. And then everything has to be accounted for. So if we track protein going into the body, you eat protein. The first thing it does is your stomach unfolds the proteins. Denatures it, unfolds it, and then eventually breaks it down into di and tripeptide forms where it goes into the small intestine and gets into the bloodstream. Then protein synthesis occurs, I believe, actually in the liver, but those amino acids have to be reformed into protein structures, which you need all the essential amino acids present at the site of protein synthesis for that to occur. But clearly, most of the protein we're eating does not get used as protein. And that's because most people are eating at least 250 grams of protein. Let's just say you're eating 250 grams of protein a day. 250 grams is basically a quarter pound. And so if you're gaining less than a quarter pound of muscle per day, anything less than that means that those proteins weren't used for protein synthesis. So what happens to them? Well, we know gluconeogenesis. Some portion of them go through gluconeogenesis, and that, I believe, the energy transfer for that, I just read a study on this, I think it's 33%. So you take a protein structure and it goes through, like, because it's an amino acid, it goes through deamination. Is that correct?
Deaminization.
Deaminization, not inization. Yeah, I forgot the I-N-A-Z. Deaminization, and then you basically have this carbon shell. And that can be converted to glucose. Not all of it is, though. But the energy lost in that process is about 33% of the energy, because anytime you're changing, you can picture yourself building blocks. You're changing something, you're taking energy to do that. So now that energy is lost, but it's not lost from all the amino acids, because some of them are used for protein synthesis. So if all of it was that way, then what's 33% of 4? Like 2.65, so really only be about 2.65 calories per gram of protein. And that's about as far as anyone really considers. But there's more. That's not all amino acids are glucogenic. There's some that are ketogenic amino acids, and those are lysine and leucine, which is really interesting because leucine is the trigger for protein synthesis. But that means the same thing happens, and like you deaminize it, and you get this carbon skeleton. But for those amino acids, that carbon skeleton doesn't get turned into glucose. It gets turned into a keto acid, and that keto acid is then used for energy, which, completely independent of ketosis, can create like ketosis breath, which like kind of a metallic, weird, like chemical, almost like bad breath kind of, and that's what I believe it is.
And so like, obviously we preface this by saying it happens during prep. I suppose it could happen during other times, but this never happens to me during the off season. And it's a feeling I associate with just feeling really run down and depleted. So is it fair to say that it happens in prep just because a larger percentage of your calories are coming from protein and you have so much less energy coming in from carbs and fats?
So same thing, let's do first principles. What happens in the off season? You have all this energy, and you have all this glycogen, and you have all this carbohydrates in the diet. The body's
Mhm.
going to prefer to use those as energy always,
Mhm.
you know. And then even if it has to break down proteins to create energy, it's going to want to use glucose first. That's the easiest energy pathway. It's not going to want to create the keto acids. I mean, it probably does, but we'd have to follow, like, I don't know the exact energy pathways for those. What's more, I'm assuming that clearly the glucose that is going to be more energy efficient because that's the most efficient energy source in the body. But keto acids, I believe, are pretty efficient also, but they must be less efficient for the cast, because it's not like your body is making these decisions like with a brain, you know. It has to just be whatever, like the first thing that happens means the most energy efficient. And so in off season, you have all these other excess calories. I think that there's no need to do that to the ketogenic amino acids to that extent.
I asked about the proportionality because, I mean, just using numbers here, like let's say I'm eating 300 grams of protein in the off season. You know, like we said, only a tiny portion of that's going to be converted into like actual protein structures. Under the best circumstances, say I convert 25 grams of those into actual new muscle in one day. So that leaves 275 grams of amino acids that still are going to be broken down into glucose. So
well, I think there's about, because you still have normal protein turnover and you have organ, you have the muscle breakdown, the muscle breakdown from training, which is going to be higher in prep because you have all the cardio. So say something like in the off season, maybe and I can't remember where I got this number from, some class 30 years ago. I think it was like the average person, the normal daily protein turnover is like 50 grams. And I think that's about why I think the RDA is probably around 50 grams of protein. So that's kind of maybe your baseline. You add off season training, maybe you're at 75 grams. You add contest training with your cardio and stuff, maybe you're at 100 grams, you know. And so now that plus maybe 25 grams of protein synthesis and whatever else is going on, you're talking about 125 grams. So above that, yeah. But yeah, I mean, you just have less calories and you have less available glycogen. And so you're going to be more likely, you never want to use protein for energy. I mean, well, I guess you could argue you do. You don't want to for energy because it's a terrible source of energy. You got to go through all these additional pathways to create a usable energy source, and it takes energy to create the usable energy source. But that's why it's beneficial in prep, because you know because it costs energy, and you're trying to lose energy.
Right.
It's so interesting even hearing about how it's beneficial during prep. We always think about it as like a byproduct of like, oh, it's just something that happens. But yeah, just thinking about it from the energy expenditure standpoint, super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you can, well, yeah, I mean, I think carbohydrates, because carbohydrates go through they get turned, you know, they go through the fatty acid synthesis process with acetyl-CoA, and I think maybe like 5 to 10% of the calories of it typically in carbohydrates. So you ingest a carbohydrate. If your blood sugar is low, that, you know, you need some of that carbohydrate to go to the blood sugar. It's going to stay elevated. Some of it's, you know, it gets converted to muscle glycogen or liver glycogen so that it can be released. You know, they all turn into ATP eventually, but you have all this stuff going on. Where was I? Totally lost my train of thought with that. Oh yeah, so you have a clear need for a lot of these carbohydrates, but if you eat too many calories, you know, if you ate 100 calories of carbohydrates and you only needed 90 calories, 10 of those calories are now useless, and they need to be turned into a mechanism that can be stored. The first step will be glycogen, but you know, if glycogen is maxed out, and you know a reason to store that's glycogen, then it'll be converted to fatty acid, and that takes about 5, maybe 10% of the calories. You know, so a very, very small portion so if you eat 100 calories of carbohydrates, maybe 10 calories of those get converted to fatty acids, and then at a 5 to 10% calorie loss. So it's really kind of nothing, you know. It's better than fat, because fat is just fat. But protein, you have multiple steps. First, you have the protein, and then most of it is probably getting converted into glucose or ketones or whatever, but mostly glucose. And like the study I just read, I think they said, I can't remember if it was a human study, it probably wasn't, but I believe it was 33% energy loss in that process. You know, so if you can really, so if 100% of, if 100% of the protein you ate got converted to that, that's basically like eating 33% less calories. It's not going to be, because we just said, well, we need 125 grams David might need just 4 protein. And so if he eats 250 grams of protein, then boom, you have 125 grams that is technically 33% less calories than that. But there's even more. This doesn't happen in prep because you're not storing fat. But if you were maxed out on glycogen and you had no use for that glucose, the next step would be whatever's left over would lose an additional 5 to 10%. And that's why protein is so beneficial. It's just before it's stored in the body, it has to go through 2 separate steps. Well, it can be stored as glycogen, but before it's stored as fat in the body, it has to go through 2 separate steps where it's like you're building something like building blocks, and that takes energy, sucks it out of the protein. So it's really thermogenic.
Kind of a tangent to something else you said. So you mentioned that if you have some amount of calories, some amount of energy from carbohydrates, and you don't need the actual carbs at that moment, you've got to have some way to store them. So you said first glycogen, then fat. So is it always that black and white? I mean, if I am glycogen deficient in anywhere in my body, is that always going to be the preferred thing to do versus storing it as fat?
Well, I believe so, because again, there's no brain involved, and so there's no thought process. It's just straight, like picture, like potential energy. It's a rock rolling down a hill. If there's a hill, it just goes that way till there's no longer going to go that way. And the glycogen synthesis pathway is more energy efficient than the fatty acid synthesis pathway. So it's going to need some reason to go back up the hill, basically.
Probably
if it's going to fall in the hole. If there's no hole, it'll keep rolling. But that glycogen, if there's a hole, it's going to fall in that.
Good thing to keep in mind for anyone who worries about getting fat from their one high carb day a week. Like if you're really depleted, like you should be at that point in a diet, pretty unlikely that you're going to really store much fat.
It's beneficial, and we can talk about why that's beneficial, because there's metabolic benefits to eating excess calories. If you eat and people, like overweight people won't believe this, but the people with the highest metabolisms are overweight people, because they eat above what they burn so frequently that the body is fine with being very inefficient with its use of calories. And so like your adaptations to exercise, the more you run, if you're a marathon runner, you become more efficient. You utilize energy more. Everything, your body's always trying to do that. And so if there's all these excess calories, it doesn't need to learn to be efficient with calories. It doesn't need to extract, like when you're in prep, you extract every nutrient. By the time it turns into poop, there's nothing left. During the off season, you got so much extra going on, but things are moving in and out. There's no need, there's no need to like suck everything. And so like overweight people have a high metabolism because they eat more than they burn. Well, we do that on a high day. We create a special case where we eat more calories than we burn. And so, yes, we're going to store those calories. If we weren't glycogen depleted, we would store those calories as fat. But because we're glycogen depleted and that glycogen synthesis pathway is the most energy efficient pathway for the carbohydrates to go, then those carbohydrates are going to get stored in the body, but stored as glycogen rather than fat. And so we have a way to eat more calories than we burn without getting fat for a day. And then that glycogen is there to fuel training the rest of the week. It improves thyroid function. It keeps your metabolism elevated. And there's not a huge metabolic loss to low calorie diets, at least not in the short term. But you don't want any if you can avoid it.
Right. Yeah. On that note, like, I mean, I think anecdotally, Danny and I would both say this works really well, and you with pretty much all your clients. That's why you do it. But from the, I don't want to like call anyone out because there's a lot of good knowledge out there, but people in like the evidence-based crowd will often say that there's no point to refeeds, that you should just run a straight deficit your entire diet, and that it's really just kind of pissing in the wind if you try to do a refeed on a diet. Like, what do you have to say to those people?
Well, I mean, where's the evidence of that? Are they saying that hypercaloric diets don't create metabolic inefficiencies, and are they saying overweight people don't have a better metabolism? They say
I don't
because
to me going in a direction I don't think I usually hear them go in that direction. They're not looking for evidence that refeeds don't work. They're looking for evidence that they do and are apparently coming up short.
Well, yeah, I mean, go to any fat person and sit them in a room and measure the heat off their body based, to measure their actual rate of energy expenditure, and it's going to be higher than the person that's lower weight. And the reason for that is a high caloric diet for the most part. It's not just the fact that they'll burn more calories with exercise because they weigh more. If you sit them in a room motionless, over an hour, they're going to burn, they're going to release more heat as a process of energy loss than a person who eats lower calories. And so
we don't have to ask.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, so that, I mean, yeah, I mean, I have no problem with people making, because that's not probably a game changer. I mean, it's hard to say what a game changer is, because we always talk about the bell curve, and in this sport, we're the very tip of the bell curve. So it's the fine details do matter, so like these few percentage points here and there of thyroid production, but it's really more nuanced than that, because you will burn more calories, not just sitting there, but through your own energy expenditure. When you have the glycogen, you're going to be more active during the day, you're going to train harder. And so, yeah, I mean, I have no problem if people want to go with the straight diet. I don't like that it's like, I hope they don't claim it as evidence-based, because one, you're not going to get any good evidence on strict diets over long periods of time, because you're not going to find a populace that's compliant enough to be. And so you have to infer, and what I would infer is, well, let's look at a case. Who do we know eats excess calories? Obese people. What do we know about obese people? They will have a higher metabolic rate than people who undereat. You take like an anorexics, like someone like anorexic, like, well, I mean, anorexics, they release so little heat, they actually start developing lanuga, which is like fine hairs on the body, to try to hold more heat onto their body. They don't produce any heat, they don't have it, and so that, like, the evidence is there. That is, I mean, that's a physiological factor of human metabolism. And
well,
so,
I can think of two kind of analogs to what you just said that are even more relevant to our population, because it's not just fat people. Like, sit any big off-season bodybuilder in a room, they're sweaty and gross just sitting there. And then I remember, and I think this is pretty common among competitors, especially when they're doing like a first diet where they're just extremely depleted. I went from being a hot box all my life to being extremely cold all the time, like the entire second half of our first prep. Like, I was literally sitting there in June in the basement working with a space heater next to me, wearing sweats.
And so I'd be perfectly fine if they make the argument that, because you're not going to get clear data on this, because I don't even know that you could trace it precisely enough. But the fact that we are restoring that glycogen, and so the benefits that come with that, for potential metabolic increase, the fact that you'll burn more calories for the rest of the week, the fact that you have all this glycogen to train on, the fact that your thyroid hormone, your hunger hormones are going to be better regulated, those benefits could be offset by the fact that you do need to burn that glycogen off. And that's calories that are non-fat calories that you're burning. So there's some loss of fat loss in that process, because if you store 100 calories of glycogen, but that's 100 calories you have to lose that isn't fat before you get to get the glycogen depleted again. And I'd be fine with that argument. And at that point is when it just becomes kind of empirical evidence for me of trying both ways and understanding the physiology. And in my experience, the benefits of the I hate calling it a refeed, because it's more precise than that. It's not just excess calories, it's excess of a specific type of calorie for a specific reason. And also, I don't believe that there's any guaranteed one only way to do anything, and there's plenty of people, and it's dependent on a lot of things. Some people, like I always say, we're not working with robots. Some people don't handle high days well, meaning once they start eating, they don't do well. And some people, you let them eat a high amount of carbohydrates and it turns into a unlimited amount of carbohydrates. And I've seen this happen many times with clients where they justify it in their brain that, well, it's high day, it's practically a cheat day, and they almost treat it that way. And so, there's that to be considered also. And some people might not do well with that because they might not have the mental control to use the high day for its purpose, which is not a fun day of free eating. It's a specific day to do all those things we talked about.
Right. So to shift gears a bit, I want to talk about the kind of mental prep that we do for really hard sessions in the gym, or even just really hard sets. And I think between the three of us, we probably each have a bit of a different approach. So Danny, what's yours?
I think it really depends on the movement too, and it depends on the microcycle in terms of like, is it a heavy deadlift or is it a heavy set of something like, I don't know, a widowmaker on the pendulum or something like that, right? Because those are both really hard, but they're hard in different ways. I think it's really important to, I mean, the nerdy part of me knows that there's a different optimal level of psychological arousal for different people and different personality types. And like Dave, it's really, really cool watching you get ready for a set because, Nick is our buddy that we train with. We'll sit there and he and I train very similarly. And so for us, like we need to be told to like keep our head in it and like stay in it on these really hard sets. And Dave's like, well, yeah, what else would I do? Like, is there another way to keep doing this?
I'm too
Yeah.
fast. My reflexes.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny when people ask me like, what's my mental prep for a set? Like, there's not a ton of prep for me right before the set. It's like, I've probably already been thinking about it all day because I'm completely obsessed. And for now, and for as long as I can maintain this, my training is extremely progressive and like oriented towards mostly quantitative goals, some qualitative too, but even then, like, I could have gotten, let's say, like 9 plates for 10 on the hack squat last week, and then like come up to this week, I'll think I could like spend 3 days thinking, well, I don't know, it's prep, I don't know if I'm going to feel good enough to hit like even another rep or get another quarter on there, but I'm going to do these reps even better than last time, and I'll like think about what those reps are going to look like off and on for literally the next 3 days, and it'll be obsessive, and it'll like keep me from focusing on work that I don't want to do. And so by the time I get to the set, there's not a whole lot more ramp up. I've already like done it 100 times in my mind. And so if someone who doesn't know me is like screaming at me mid set, it's just kind of annoying because like, you don't need to tell me up. I know I'm supposed to go up. I know I'm supposed to push. Those words don't mean anything right now. You don't need to tell me to stay in the set. Like, I'm here, I'm in it. So at that point, I'm just focusing on like maybe a couple of physical cues that I know I need to employ to keep the set going the way I want it to. And then beyond that, I guess the mental approach for like lower body training, especially like the 4 big sets we do for quads, or I do for quads every week, plus deadlifts, like there's a little bit of you're always kind of playing for fire with those sets in terms of injury risk when you get strong. And so I'm like, I try not to get to a place where I'm worried about injuring myself mid-set, but there are a couple of cues that I will be really bang on in my head about, because I know that that's, like a little positional change could be the difference between a fantastic set and tweaking something. Like, not catastrophic, but it can mean the difference between a successful set and like setting myself back for a couple of weeks.
It's funny to say about getting injured. When I was probably, I don't know, maybe a freshman or sophomore in high school, I can't remember his name. Was it for the Jets or the Lions? He got paralyzed as a defensive end. Anyways, I remember, don't know who was talking, whether it was on TV, whether I heard 2 adults talking or whatever, but they said something about why, like drunk people never get injured in car crashes. It's because they're so relaxed. And so that stuck with me. And so all through football and then all through my big list, that's what I focus on. I wouldn't start the set. It's stupid. And now that I have kids, like it seems really especially stupid, but I would like kind of ask myself, well, okay, these are the number of reps I'm getting. If I'm supposed to get 12 and I get to 11 and it comes down to, get number 12 or die, am I going to do that? And I would, if I convince because I knew it wasn't going to happen. I knew it wasn't, but I knew that if I'm just all in, no reservation, like the drunk person who's so out of it, there's no thought, there's no tense, so it doesn't matter. I don't care if I'm going up and I feel my heart stop. I'm, then I'll just die. I'm not it's stupid, it seems silly, but that's what I would think. And then at work, I never got injured.
Yeah.
Like my whole career, never. The only time what's funny is all my injuries were after my training career when I stopped doing that. And it's really silly, and it can't be really related, but I would really do that. If you ever watch like any of my old YouTube videos, it only takes like a second. Like like before I get on the bar, I think that, and like, am I really okay? I'm going to be tired. It's going to be the 12th rep. I'm going to be exhausted. Am I going to quit? And I say, no, I'm doing 12 reps or I'm dying. That's it. And that was it. And if you get in that like mindset, I think it worked for me anyways. I feel like,
yeah,
Yeah.
But then also, I don't know what kind of lifter. I'm a happy lifter.
I
You know,
was
like,
literally, I was just gonna go there. We're
Yeah.
like, when we were late in January,
Yeah.
and we were like, team lift happy. And
Yeah.
for me, it's like certain lifts, like if I deadlift, I have to lift happy. Or like somewhere in between. If I squat, it has to be happy.
Yeah.
But something like a heavy leg press or heavy hack, it's a different
Interesting.
mindset for me.
See,
Yeah.
I'm tingly right now. Like I got goosebumps. I get like still. I mean, I don't lift heavy anymore. Oh my god, I love that. I love lifting. Like just leaving it all. Like to me, that
Yeah.
was the most enjoyable. And I can remember lifting milestones better than anything else in my life. I remember benching. Well, I started young. I remember benching 95. I remember the first time I did 135. First time I did 185. First time I did 225. I remember the first time I did 225 with the 2 1/4. I remember the first time I got 315. I remember the first time I squatted 405. And I can picture, I know what gym I was at. I know, like, I can, from almost every squat, I can tell you the Adidas button warm-up pants I wore with Doc Martens the first time I squatted 405, 455, 495. I can tell you the white pants the first time I squatted 585, 605, 625. I mean, like those things were like I think in general, if you want to go somewhere in this sport, it has to be that important to you. If those lifting milestones aren't milestones like other milestones in your life, then it's not going to. And it's a silly little sport, it's just lifting weights, but if it catches you and and like you get bitten by the bug and it's at that, it needs to be at that level. And if it's not, then
it's funny when other people start to, sometimes other people try to talk to me about lifting and I know they don't really get it. And so to them, I'll just say it's just lifting weights. I don't really want to, because I don't want to talk to them about it, because I know they're not going to understand like my complete obsession. Like, like I don't use the word love lightly, like, like I don't love that many things. Like I love Danny, I love, my family, a few close friends, but as far as like things, I love training. I guess you could say I love cooking, but that's not close. Like I love training. And so like you were talking about how you lift happy. I wouldn't exactly say I lift happy, but like some of the most fulfilling things I've ever done in my life were those milestones. So I feel completely the same way. Like there's very little like accomplishments that I remember the way I remember certain lifting milestones, which is why like I can't really resonate with people to whom training just comes really easy. And I guess, I mean, there aren't that many people that fit this bill. When you meet someone though, who's like really genetically gifted and they grow easy, and it's like, they kind of treat lifting nonchalantly. I don't understand. Like I had to like scrape and crawl my way to every one of these milestones, and it meant so much. And I was so happy to get there. And then all I can think about is the next one after that. I'm like, so.
You did.
Well, our brains too are hardwired to experience that reward after we do something hard. So for you, like scrapping or clawing your way to get that extra plate, to get that extra quarter, to get the extra rep, like that is so hardwired into our brain chemistry that like, yeah, that totally makes sense. But you have to love that process.
I think you said fulfilling. I think that that's a better word than happy.
Yeah.
Like the way I would describe it is like the day before, or like when I had big sets planned, there's no way I could be depressed. It was like I was so excited about my future. If tomorrow was the day I was gonna go for 495 for 20 on squat, or 500 for 20, if it's, what's today, Sunday, if Monday was the day I was gonna do that, I'm like I mean I'm so anxious to get today over with, but I'm so like pumped that tomorrow that's going to happen. It was weird because when I quit competing and stopped having that, it was a really rough transition because I was used to every day having so much value and importance, and kind of not that I wanted to wish, like I wasn't wishing away my life, trying to always get to some future, but I was so excited about each new day because there was all these things like goals that I was so pumped about. And again, it's silly, it's weight, but it's fulfilling, is like the best word I can think.
Yeah, it's funny how. Oh, go ahead. No,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's funny how you said how like happy looking forward to that next PR will make you, and I feel like I've incorporated that into like anytime I've gotten hurt, I mean, to be honest, I've never really sustained a big injury. It's just that like little hurts piss me off so much because they compromise this thing that I love. But the thing that will get me out of a funk is just planning like a month ahead, because I can say, okay, I know if I'm not stupid with this little strain, a month from now I'll be fine. And then I can be back to this. And so I'll start, like, I will like pull out a notepad on my computer and write down like 2 months from now, I'm going to break this PR. And that will make me happy again. And then I can go about my day and not like dwell on the fact that today's session couldn't be the perfect session that I wanted. And it sounds silly because like logically, physiologically, we know that if I'm in prep and I need to like retain muscle, it's like I'm accomplishing the goal just fine with whatever I did today. But it's just like, it means so much more to me than just that to have training go well. So.
Yeah, most people don't. I mean, most people just wake up, go to work, and that's it. It's, you know, most people don't have something. Just the whole weightlifting thing was such a, like, changed my life, or had such a big impact on my life, because I think we talked about this in another time, you know, like as a kid, like I'm not outgoing, I'm not like charismatic, I'm not a talker, I'm very introverted, you know, and so like I just kind of blended in the background, you know, and I'd like want to be better at sports or things like that, but I just wasn't. If you're not, it seemed like if you weren't just naturally gifted, then you had no choice. But weight training is what like made me realize that wasn't true. Like, you know, I worked out and didn't know what I was doing, but then, you know, you keep going, and I was getting stronger and realizing that, whoa, I did these things and now I'm better at it than I was before. Completely changed. I mean, as 14 years old, I mean, I was like tinkering with weights early, but when I remember even sitting in my bed and really kind of understanding that, like, wow, I could do anything. I'm here. If I need to get here, you know, how many steps to get there? I mean, I use that for everything, you know, like any goal you have or anything, it's like, well, I'm here, I want to get here. I can't get to there here, but I can get to here, you know, and then what do I have to do to get to here? And you know, and it's like, it's a real powerful thing. I wish everyone could feel that, you know.
And I think for me, this prep, it's something I've talked about with Dave a lot, because I used to love training, and lately, you know, being deep in prep when you're tired and you're depleted, and especially if you're coaching or you're in healthcare, you do something where you're so oriented towards other people, and you give everything you can to see people in a better spot. By the time you get to train, it's like, I don't want to be here. But it's kind of like you said, like, if you know that if you want to be at, you know, X point 6 months from now, like, I hate to like be super cheesy, but it is about just showing up and like doing the thing. And like, especially for me, this prep, I would say probably every session, except for maybe like 1 or 2 where I actually got to deadlift. Probably every session the last 6 to 8 weeks has been that way, of like just going in and just getting it done. And so it's like super important to be like, you know, excited about your training. Like, I think the reality is, for most of us, like, we're going to go through chapters where it doesn't feel that way, but being able to like get through that chapter is often what precedes, you know, the catapult forward.
Well, I think we talked about this before too, or I talk about my kids anyways. Another really powerful thought process or important thing in life is that the best future for you almost always involves doing the thing you don't want to do right now. And you know, like, it's easy. Like if you think, okay, when I graduated high school, I didn't want, you know, like, I don't want to go to a trade. I don't want to go to college. I don't want to learn more. Well, that's great. That's what you want to do right now. That's not a good future, you know. On any given, I don't want to go to work today. I'm going to go party. Yes, that's awesome today, but your future, that's as far as you get. You know, you've shut the but if I do the things I don't want to do today, and in the future, I'm still going to be doing the things I don't want to do rather than things I do want to do. Only at some point in the future, I'm going to be working in a home office, or I'm going to be, you know, working at a beautiful vacation, or I'm going to have a lovely home with my family, or I'm going to have, you know, I'm going to have like a career that I enjoy. You're like, you're never going to do the thing you want, but the thing you want is only good in that moment, and then it creates a whole future that sucks. But if you're doing the things that, you know, like, that you don't want to do to achieve the things you want, eventually the thing you don't want to do is such a better life than doing the thing you want to do if you would have went that route.
I was listening to a podcast. Oh, I can't remember what it was, but he talked a lot about how basically like every event is a decision. Every event, like, you know, whether it's like what you eat or you go, I don't know, a set, for example, in training, like, it's all a decision. And those decisions ultimately culminate in our baseline. And all of our decisions are going to culminate to either an elevated or flattened baseline. And yeah, I think training's a big example of that.
Think about that kind of thing during HIIT cardio, which is like the one part of this entire process. I wouldn't even say I hate it anymore, but it's definitely like, I mean, actually, I would say in the off season, I appreciate its benefits because I still have good wind, even when I'm like really big. And at the beginning of prep, I'm like, fine. But now, now at this point in prep, it's just kind of miserable. But like, this is the thing that gets you to where you want to go. And I always remember what you told us during our first prep, which is you don't train your way into a show. You don't train your way into condition as much as we would like that to be the case. You diet and cardio your way into condition. So I think about that when I'm doing HIIT. I think about it when I have to weigh out like 3 grams of fat of avocado rather than the entire thing that I want to eat, all that.
The donuts, basically. You gave us that analogy too.
Oh yeah.
Like
yeah.
the donut commercial.
Got time to make the donuts. Yeah, I used to say that. Yeah. When I get up, it just became my thing. I bet people aren't old enough probably. In the 80s, there was a like Dunkin' Donuts. There's this like guy with a mustache, and it was always waking up at like 3 a.m. and he'd say, time to make the donuts, because he had to be in to make the donuts that were, so make sure they were ready for all the people, when they go to work. So we had to get up before everyone. And that's what I always used to say every morning. Like that's just my thing, and yeah, it's, oh man, I lost my train of thought again. We got to do these earlier in the day when my brain's functional. I can't remember what I was going to say. It was going to be really good though. But
Obviously. Yeah, I use that phrase a lot. People ask Dave and I all the time, like, how do you guys stay so motivated? Keep like doing, you guys are like superhuman. I'm like, Dave is superhuman. He's the most process-oriented person I think I've ever known. But I think for me, just that phrase that you gave us our first prep of the donuts, I was like, yeah, that's so true for so many things.
No one's motivated. That's the thing. Like people see like The Rock, or you're not motivated, and that's the people who never reach their goals. That's what they're always. I need to get motivated. No, you're not. And that the times when you are motivated, that's great. Take advantage of it. But they're few and far between. And even worse, success creates motivation. You get motivated from success. Motivation doesn't create success. When you string a bunch of successes along, that's when you start getting motivated. And that's why when people are in shape, they stay in shape, because you don't want to lose that. If you're overweight and not in shape, it's such a long, but when you've worked so hard to get in shape, it's almost harder to eat off the diet, because I don't want to ruin all this. And so you just have to. I remember at a gym one time, like a lady, she was, wanted to lose weight, and she had a hard time, and she couldn't understand, because she thought, she asked me, you don't make your kids eat like that, do you? And I was like, no, they eat, normal food. And she was like, well, but don't you want to eat it? And I was like, well, yeah. And she's like, well, then why don't you eat it? And I said, it's not on my meal plan, And
because I want this more.
I said, nothing you do all day is what you want to do. She worked at the gym. I said, you don't want to work here right now, but you are, right? Why? Because you have to. You don't want to pay bills. Why? You pay them because you have to. You don't want to pay for gas. You don't want to drive to work. You don't want to wake up to an alarm. You don't want to go to bed when you're not tired. You don't want to, go to some event. Everything you do all day, you wake up to an alarm you don't want to wake up to. You shower and dress as fast as you can to get to a job you don't want. You got to drive in traffic you don't want to. You got to pay for gas. You go to work when you'd rather stay at home. You got to pay for gas on the way home. You go to some sport event with your kids that you might not want to go to. You got to do laundry. You got to clean the house. Every minute of your day is doing stuff you don't want to do because you have to. This is the one thing that you get to do for yourself, and you're going to make it optional. None of all those things that you don't want to do, you don't consider optional. You don't think it's optional to just go to work. You go to work. And so to me, that never made sense, because why wouldn't I eat on the diet? I don't want to go to work today either. I did that. This is the one thing I'm doing for myself. Why would I make that optional?
There's a phrase in the precision nutrition certification that discipline precedes motivation. And I give that to people because it's so true, where, I had somewhere I was going with that too, but
well, it's like if people, Jocko Willink gets a lot of followers now, and he posts that his watch at 4:29 a.m. every day, and all the comments you think, oh, I wish I had that motivation, and it cracks me up. You think he's motivated to get up at 4:30 in the morning? No one is. No, he hates it, but he just does it. And then now he's done it so much that it's his thing now, and now he's done it so much where now it's no longer like a big deal to do it. If he didn't do it, it would be like a big deal that he didn't do it, that he failed, because it's, you just got to it's like getting like a snowball rolling down a hill, or a boulder down a hill. It's hard to get it moving. Once it's going, it keeps going and it keeps picking up speed. People are always looking to have that speed to start with. It's not. You gotta do the thing you don't want to do at all, and you're gonna have to do it multiple times when you don't want to do it until the success starts happening, and then you're going to be motivated to do it.
Yeah.
It's funny how that motivation kind of like shows up in funny places. Like like your diet in the off season isn't, in my opinion, it's not that restrictive. I mean, we're still eating on the food list for almost every meal, but like I have 2 high days, sometimes 3. So that's like every week I get at least a couple chances to have a free meal. And yet there are still certain foods where I probably won't eat them at any time of the year other than the 36 hours post show, when I'm so lean that I can say, I can gain a couple pounds of fat from this meal if it was that bad, and I wouldn't care. But even any other time of the year, I'm like, no, donuts are too much of a fat ass food. I can't have donuts for my cheat. So
that's that's funny, because people's cheats in the off season are always way less than their cheats.
Oh man, our cheats lately have been like, I think last night may have been the biggest cheat meal I've ever had in my entire life. It was excellent.
Oh, glorious.
Did I ever tell you about the worst cheat meal I ever had?
No.
Maybe you need to though.
Yeah, no, I hear this. Are you gonna tell us?
No, it's a joke. It did go over your head. I said it was amazing. There's no such thing as a bad cheat meal.
Oh no, beg to differ. Like, I think especially Dave is a great cook. I'm a pretty good cook and I love to bake. And we've gone out for dinner at places, and like, I can't tell you how many times we've walked out.
Yeah. I guess that was more just a silly joke. You're right, because I can think of some very disappointing cheat meals. That'll break your heart.
We're also like the biggest food snobs ever. Like Dave is.
Yeah.
I'm not. I have no palate at all. But there's no more immediate smack in the face of depression than going out for a cheat meal and having it be gross.
Yeah, I think every prep so far, we've pretty much settled into like, this is going to be our cheat meal for the rest of prep. Like the first prep, it was like a pasta, bacon, garlic bread. The second prep, it was fajitas, and now it's burritos, and we always make it. And anytime, like occasionally we'll end up talking to some other like bodybuilder at the gym, and we'll say, oh yeah, we have cheat meal on Saturdays. Like, oh, why don't we like go out? And like, we're like, no, we're not risking it. Like,
not risking.
So
my favorite physicist, Richard Feynman, had physicists are weird. So he had a solution like that with desserts, is he could never decide what dessert he wanted. And so like sometimes he'd pick, I don't know, lemon meringue pie, or he'd pick something weird and it wouldn't be good. He'd be so bummed out that he got, but then he realized like chocolate cake was always good. And so he just decided that was the only dessert he was ever going to have, because he knew it was good. And then he stopped worrying about if maybe some of the other ones were better. He didn't, because he knew this was going to be good. And so for the rest of his life, if he ever ordered dessert, it was chocolate cake.
I think Dave and I can both really resonate with that.
Yeah.
That's
I think, we'll go to Cheesecake Factory post show and get a few different desserts. And then every other cheat meal of the year is Danny bakes cookies. And then as we drive to the gym, what do you think I should bake tonight? Like, well, you're going to make like a peanut butter cookie and a chocolate chip cookie, and then maybe some other kind of cookie like you do every single week. And it's awesome. And we're going to do it again.
Well, but there are a lot of times I want to make something different. And we talked about this yesterday. We're like, once you have a thing you like, it really takes someone nudging you to try something different.
That's fair, yeah.
For you to like get out of your, because I would a total fat kid make something way more elaborate, but we get in our habits. Yeah. And when you know what you're getting, there's that comfort zone of like, I know it's going to be good. I get one meal to be a human.
Did I lose you guys? Okay, I thought I lost you. I've done that to try to describe like one easy thing people can do. This might not be for our podcast listeners, but one easy thing people can do is when they're first trying to lose weight, what I try to tell people is, you go to a restaurant and there's almost always 2 or 3 options that you're considering. One simple thing is just pick the healthiest version of that. Most people just doing that is enough to, you like, people think like when you go on go on a diet or something, you'll suddenly have to eat terrible food. It's like, no, just for the average overweight American, just when you go to a restaurant, it's like, I can't decide between these three. Instead of just trying to decide which of the one is going to taste better, because they all taste good and you can't quite decide, you know, all three of them look good. Just pick the one that's the lowest calorie.
Yeah, you talked about that on the table talk with Dave Tate. I think it's like, well,
Yeah.
you know, the steak is going to be good, and like the lasagna or whatever will also be good, but it will also be 3 times the calories. So just go for the steak. You still get to eat a steak at a restaurant.
Yeah. And I still, I mean, I like, even when I'm not dieting, I still like, I'll never not be able to think that way, because I still do that, you know, in any restaurant. I still, I eat, you know, now that I'm not so strict with everything, I'll go to a restaurant and eat off the menu, but I'll still, there'll be a couple things, and I'll pick, of the 3 things that seem like they taste good, I'll pick like the healthiest version of the 3.
That's kind of a nice side effect of being in the fitness world for so long. Like you realize how terrible you feel if you eat that kind of shitty food for like days on end. I mean, like we enjoy the hell out of it when we're deep into a diet and depleted, but like outside of that scenario, like, do you really want to eat crappy food and feel like the average person? Like,
no, and that's something I wish people who never have ate healthy could learn. And that's a thing, that's like one of those other things that like success breeds motivation, because you have to get to that point. But once you've eaten good for a while, you realize, like, God, like people that eat terrible must just feel terrible all day. Blood sugar spiking, energy crashes, that like gross, like feels like your throat is coated with oil for like an hour after you eat something really high fat, that sluggish, that, you know, your gut's so bloated. It's like, you know, like, I mean, the food does taste good. And when you're stuck in that mode and you've just been eating food that tastes good and you feel bad, you know, it's hard to, oh, I'm going to eat something that, you know, that's healthy, and I still feel bad because it, you know, it's not an immediate reaction. But like, if you can get over that edge and eat good and make good food choices, you have so much more energy. I remember when I was an echocardiographer trying to explain that too, because it was an office of all women and me, you know, and I would like, I just like, they call me like Steady Eddie, you know, because I didn't fall asleep, you know, after lunch. I didn't complain about it. I'm like, well, because, you know, I eat at that point was like hyper, you know, strict with my eating. It's like my day is so organized and steady, and it's all like foods in the exact amount I'm weighed, eating at the exact time, you know, like it blew my mind that they went through life with these ups and downs and pitfalls and crashes, and that, you know, because it's like, you don't have to be that way. And it's not like my food even tastes bad, you know. I'm eating good food. I'm eating meat, steak, rice, but
this is something we started to touch on earlier, so I'll go back to it. Kind of comparing our mental approaches to this whole, I'll say, fitness game, this whole bodybuilding thing. So some people like myself are extremely process oriented, and then some people like Danny, I'd probably say, are more goal oriented and result oriented. And I think, like Danny mentioned this almost as if my way is better, and I wouldn't necessarily say that's the case. I think it lends itself to bodybuilding really well because it's such a long-term process driven kind of thing where you grind for years for something that you do one day out of the year, if that.
You broke up. You said you are what oriented?
I'm process oriented.
Like,
I derive the most pleasure from just ticking the boxes every day and doing the thing every day. And Danny's more goal oriented. Like, I won't say she only cares about the end result, but she cares about it certainly more than I do. And so I wanted to mention, we kind of blew past it, but I think it's the way I am is kind of to my detriment sometimes. I mean, just looking at a prep, for example, and this is the case in bodybuilding. It was definitely the case when we were powerlifting. I get to the very end and I don't like all the stuff at the end, which to me is kind of like the polish that you're putting on the year worth of work that you already did. And it's hard for me not to just lose sight of the end result and just start thinking about the process and building upon what I already worked on the past year, because that's the whole joy of the thing to me.
Yeah, I think that is a negative. I totally understand that, because once I was the same way. Once I was in better shape and I knew I improved my physique, but I also knew it wasn't my all-time best physique possible. It was like I had no interest in the stage. It's like, okay, I did this. I'm still not Mr. Olympia. So I just like, why am I wasting a whole week? Can I just go to off season and start to I totally get that. And so that isn't good, because I mean, it's not bad because you're going to go through the process, but the sport is just so, I mean, every sport, I guess, has game day, you know, but this sport is so you have to, like, the intensity and nuance and specificity you have to give to everything ramps up, and then dramatically ramps up for those final few days, you know.
Yeah.
And that final stuff is no longer the long-term goal stuff. It's just this very short, specific competition goal. And in a lot of cases, it's actually detrimental for a few days to your long-term goals. So if
Right.
you're not if the goal isn't your main thing, it's probably not the best for the sport, because, you know, most sports, like, you know, I don't know, you run the 100-meter, you know, you train, and all the things you did for training to improve your speed are all maximized on the race day, you know. Where our sport, like, we try to get stronger, we try to build muscle, we try to burn fat, all those things we do, and then the last few days we kind of reverse it, and we're carving up, we're dehydrating, and we're really weak, and it's the opposite of everything we've done in this whole long, you know, we have this whole long-term path through a bodybuilding career, and then the days that actually matter, the whole week before
Right.
that is like a totally different thing. And so if that goal isn't super focused, I think it's probably not the best for the sport.
Yeah.
Well, but if someone's way too goal oriented, the day-to-day feels terrible, because you feel like you're so far from doing this thing. And especially if you're someone who has really, really high goals, it just kind of feels like, is it even worth it? Like, if I'm not going to win the Olympia, is it worth me doing these things that feel terrible day to day? Is it worth me feeling awful? So I think it's really important, especially someone who's like goal oriented, is I've had to go and basically reframe, you know, the goal from being show day and being, you know, in peak condition on show day, being like, okay, like, what's the goal for this week? What's the goal for this day? And kind of like break it down to sub goals. I think that's the only way I figured out how to manage my psychology, as someone who's so freaking achievement oriented that I have to like make my day an achievement. It's not healthy.
I've done something, well, I don't know if I'd say similar, but I've had to kind of revise my mental approach, realizing that those last 2 to 3 weeks, it's really hard for me to stay focused on the end goal. But I do know that, like, the rebound has been a huge part of this whole process, and it's why I've been able to, like, put on so much stage weight the last couple of years. And so I don't know how true this exactly is, but I tell myself, the more, like, probably the more miserable I am during those last few weeks and the more depleted I get, the better the rebound will be. Now, I don't know if that's really true, or if, like, 2 weeks out, I'm already at the point where I can maximize the rebound, but
yeah, like logical at 2 weeks out.
Yeah, but yeah, like, I know that, or at least I tell myself that the entire next year's worth of process and progress can be made better by doing everything I need to do to get to the goal right now. And then once I finally get to that last 24 hours, then I finally will change my mindset, because I'll look in the mirror, and instead of thinking, I have so far to go, then I'll be like, okay, wow, the peak worked. I'm looking pretty damn good. This is better than I ever thought I'd look in my life. So, like, for a very brief moment, I enjoy the end result. But
there is that weird moment, like, there's very few rare moments when you actually look good that you can see yourself that way, you know. Like, now, like, looking back at my old photos, even the photos that I was like, I would never have posted, and I was like ashamed of, you know, looking back, it's like, holy crap, you know. But every once in a while, when you get like you walk past a mirror and you're like, holy shit, I'm huge, you know. But like, and then it vanishes, and you're back to, like, you seeing yourself with that bit, like reverse anorexia. But I want to talk about something, and I think this is actually something we could separate into we'll leave it here and maybe even do a separate video, is the rebound. Like, it blows my mind that is not universally done now at this point.
Beyond that, people always look at what you've done with us and they're like, wow, he's being really aggressive. And we're like, yeah. It's gotten bigger.
It blows my, like, how many cases do we have, you know, like Don Trivlini, you know, going from a middleweight to a super heavyweight in like two years, you know. Ben Pollock going from 181 pounds to 281 pounds. David adding like a whole human every year, basically. You going from never competing to competing as a professional in like 2 contests, basically. Paul Barnett, anabolic bodybuilding, you know. I don't know, I don't understand, and people will sign on with me and they'll still say, you know, yeah, I want to work with you after my show, but, you know, I'm just going to take like a month and chill out after the show. And it's like, why? I don't, like, and then, like, well, just from like first thought, if you are super lean, if you're so lean that you could gain 15 pounds of fat and still be lean, imagine how much muscle you could gain in that process. And then add to that, if you were in that situation with insulin sensitivity, the highest you'll ever have in your adult life. And then add to that appetite, the highest you're ever going to have, you know, and it's like that people don't take advantage of that. Blows my mind, because even if no one knew about a rebound or no one was using that, no coaches were doing that, it's right there in front of everyone. What happens to bodybuilders? They move up to the state level and then they compete at the national level year after year after year with the same physique, whatever, maybe they're 221 pounds, you know, trying to turn pro, bring in a slightly different version of the same thing. They compete once a year. What happens when they finally turn pro? They blow up. Why? Because now they're on the pro circuit. They might have to compete 2 seasons per year. They have to get really depleted for they might have to do 3-4 contests in a row. And so what happens? They get multiple rebounds a year, and then everyone explodes with size once they turn pro. And of course, people listen to this in the comments and be like, yeah, well, that's when they get access to the pro anabolics, you know. It's, you know, like everyone's using the same stuff anyways. It's like, it's so obvious in front of you that people don't take advantage of it. Just absolutely blows my mind, because what's required to grow? You need a high appetite. When's your appetite highest? After a diet. What's required to grow? You need to be able to utilize nutrients. When's your insulin sensitivity highest? Right after a diet. You know, you need to be able to eat excess calories and continue that for a period of time without getting overly fat, because if your body fat gets too low, you lose, you know, anabolism. When is your body fat lowest? After a diet. When you need to be motivated. When is motivation going to be the highest? Usually after diet, you know, after you get on stage and you've seen yourself on stage, you need to be able to progress in the gym. When are you going to be able to most clearly and obviously make rapid progression in the gym? When you're coming out of a diet and you're weak and depleted. You know, it's like, you know, it just blows my mind that that's not absolute, just straight standard practice. And it kind of is now, but it's still not. It's still a lot of people.
No, so many people don't use it. Like there's actually one of the guys that we were asking you about last week. You know, I looked at his stage shots from last year and I'm like, he looks leaner now, but size wise, he looks like the same person. And I'm like, to me as a bodybuilder, like that would make me really disappointed.
Well, you're missing out. It's like, when am I most optimized for growth? The 6 weeks after a show. I mean, literally, probably what happens with most of my guys actually is they're at their all-time heaviest body weight 6 weeks post-show, and they pretty much stay there all off season. They might slowly gain a little bit more. Well, if you miss that jump forward, then you're just, all you get is that barely chugging along, which is why guys gain 3, 4, 5 pounds a year at best. It's like, you're missing, you know, you're missing 30 pounds every show.
Can we, one question I have for you is, like, as an athlete, aside from following the diet you give us to a T, is there anything we can do to maximize that time the most, other than like train smart, train hard? Like, are there certain things that
like, don't stress about it, honestly. And I always say, you know, like, there's a reason like the dumb bodybuilder meathead stereotype exists. And it's because the only people who succeed are the people who, and it's not like dumb, it's the people who aren't high strung. You know, you won't find a hyper high, and I have some clients who could be very, very good competitors, but they're too high strung. You like, there's a reason you talk to like most pro bodybuilders, they look like they just, you know, smoke the joint, like, you know, can't be, you know, they can't be bothered to give a shit about anything. And it's because those are the only people who are able to succeed, that don't overanalyze. You just need to just enjoy the process, don't stress about things. But really, I mean, that's really it. Just like, almost so much that, because if you're worried about trying to do all the little extra things, you're going to hold yourself back, because it's don't worry. Worry is cortisol. Worry is the enemy of growth. Growth.
I think go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
Okay. I was gonna say, so obviously I'm 100% bought into the rebound, but just to play devil's advocate here, I wonder if some people would worry about health, basically. Just to give a little more background, like, I mean, I've never known you to like push things aggressively as far as PEDs are concerned. I mean, not like unreasonably, but you know, we have a lot of people think that they need to like come off or go down to a cruise immediately after a show, because they've, they have a quote unquote like toxic environment for however many weeks leading up to it. Whereas we say, no, you don't need to be pushing the doses that you would at like peak off season, but you should, stay on some stuff to really maximize this time. And I think people might worry about that. Now, at this point, I don't, because I've gotten blood work like 6 weeks post show, still in the middle of the rebound. And the only thing that was off was like my HDL was a little bit lower than I'd like, but not like low. So
Well, I'll argue the opposite. I'll argue that that's why, because again, what do we have you run? Like 60% of your peak off-season doses, right?
mhm.
So the bulk of our growing is done on like 60% of our max dose.
Yeah.
Everyone else does all of their growing at max dose. We don't. We do the bulk, like 75-85% of our entire muscle growth for the year is done at just barely above half our peak off-season dose,
Mhm.
in a short period of time. So if you're to me, you're saying, like, I know you're playing a devil's advocate, but what the devil's advocate here is, rather, we have two choices. You can gain 85% of your entire off-season size in a 6-week cycle at 60% of your normal dose, or we can not gain 85% and gain even less size, but we're going to do one really long cycle at a really high dose, only we're going to take a little break before it, So I would say, yes, you're stressed from your prep, but what do is we lower the doses. Our dose aren't, and it's only 4 to 6 weeks, and then we take a break. And after you take that break, you've already added the size. Now we don't need to do anything crazy in the off season.
Yeah. Well, to argue the other side too, I mean, I think you've even said that with a lot of anabolics, you can be pretty stupid.
Yeah.
And as long as you don't take the wrong stuff for too long. And so the stuff that really hurts you, coming into a show is like Tren and orals basically, and AIs are terrible for you. And those things all go away. And so you're really just taking the stuff. I'm not going to claim that it's good for you, but it's so much less deleterious to your health than the stuff that you run to look your best on show day.
Yeah, it's like mind-boggling to me with like the whole the rebound process isn't universal, because you're taking less gear, you're using the safest stuff, only injectables. What we do, and I'm assuming we can say on YouTube, but test as your base, and then a mild anabolic, also injectable, as your other dose at like 75 to 80% of your test dose. That's it, 2 compounds. And we stick to the things that don't spike blood pressure, don't mess up your prolactin levels, don't affect liver enzyme. It's like, yeah, it's like blows my mind. It's like if you came to someone and be like, all right, I can get you 85% of your entire year's muscle growth in 6 weeks. They'd be like, oh, what do I have to do? Well, we're going to run a real low dose cycle. It's like, like it's almost like too good to be true. It's like, like if someone presented that to you, you'd be like, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to grow better than I ever did on.
And I think the people who just claim that this sport is all drugs, and who claim that big leaps in progress are all drugs, just needs to experience this like once, because like you said, you're using the least stuff at any point in the year other than a cruise, and you make the most progress in muscle.
Yeah, and no one's going to say that's the problem. Is people always say that because there's some they haven't tried. And so I've tried these compounds. I still don't look like a pro bodybuilder. Therefore, it's these compounds that are the secret. And I try that one. I'm not a pro bodybuilder. That's not it. And eventually they try all of them and they say, well, clearly I got to take even more, and it's like in the comments in this are going to be saying, I'm not saying they're not a part of the sport. They are a very large part of the sport. But the problem is like, think of how things work. What is muscle? It's protein, the gear does nothing. You could take an infinite amount of gear. If you don't train and eat, you can't create it from nothing. It's like you're building a house. And I've used this analogy, I think on here even, like training is like the foreman. It tells everyone where to work on the house, or the general contractor. So we're doing electrical work today. We're working on the basement here today. And that's your training is directing where everyone to go. And now the gear is like how many employees you have. If you're natural, you don't have very many employees. You have 1 or 2 guys building this house. Just them. It's a long process. With gear, you can add even more employees. And you could take more, maybe add 1,000 employees. But what are the employees doing? They need wood and nails and screws. They can't build a house without the materials. So the gear, you have all these employees, you still have to supply the proper nutrition. You have to have the wood, you have to have the nails. And so if you don't supply that proper nutrition, that those employees are useless. And that's what the people, and they're probably going to be in the comments of whatever, I'll look at this at some point in the future and they're going to be disagreeing with me. But that's what's happening. You got all this, you're not putting them to use. And then in the rebound period is when you really are putting them to use, because your insulin sensitivity is the highest, your appetite's the highest, your nutrient absorption rate's the highest, your hunger hormones are optimized to just eat mountains of clean food and love every minute of it, And so you basically have, you have a case where now you have your foreman and you don't need as many workers because you've got like Iron Man workers, with like spacesuits that can work so efficiently, and you just supply an endless supply of wood and nails and they could, build a home quicker than ever.
Yeah. So I want to talk about another aspect of the rebound that maybe some people have trouble with. I think it'd probably be like maybe more of a women thing. So I'll get Danny's perspective on it. But like, I know that I blow up in size, but I get super bloated during the rebound too. And not to a point where my blood pressure's out of line, because I do check it, like blood pressure, kidneys were all fine. But, there's been a few days where I had cankles, and like, it certainly isn't my stage look. You go from looking your sharpest ever to not. Personally, I won't say I'm not vain at all, but I'm not so vain that's going to overshadow my love of the progress that I'm making. But like, Danny, how do you feel when you're all of a sudden, visually probably weeks away from what took you months to achieve?
I think it's hard to, and it very much depends on the division. Most women, I think, compete in, we look at bikini and wellness, and you have to get pretty lean for wellness, but Justin, correct me if I'm wrong, that the leaner you get, really the more sensitive you become to this opportunity of the rebound, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think that it really depends on the division too, where I think that's where a lot of coaches who don't give their girls like a rebound, maybe there's the time and place for it. But for me, it's definitely, it helps. And this is part of why I registered for the powerlifting meet this year after all the shows. You don't feel great, but having something else to kind of shift your mind to obviously helps a ton. And like, for me, I think figuring out how to maximize your psychology in terms of what you value can be really, really important. So one of the things that I talk about with a lot of my girls just from the coaching side is kind of understanding who they are as a person, understanding what motivates them, understanding, their highs and lows, and how to shift that mentality. Because our thoughts that we think in that time, our thoughts that we think at any point are incredibly powerful, but being able to kind of anticipate that and know how to shift that conversation internally is, I think, as a female, incredibly important. I've managed to do that by kind of leveraging the powerlifting performance background.
Justin, do you find that a lot of your female clients have trouble with this, or maybe even male clients? I don't know.
No, they do. Yeah. And it's division specific. And I think it's related to kind of like most male bodybuilders got into it because they wanted to be huge, and so being extra huge after the show, even if, have a little water on the ankles, isn't a bad thing. I mean, for one, it sucks the way society is this way, but society is much more forgiving of men carrying a little excess, bloat around. So if you're huge, trapped shoulders and arms, guys don't take the shirts off. It's not, you're not at the beach every day, So if you're filling out a shirt, you feel pretty good. You can wear long pants and no one sees your pitting edema, But women isn't that, it isn't that way. It's like society's much less forgiving for women to look that way. And so they tend to have a harder time mentally with losing all their definition. And you can't really avoid it. And if they don't, it's not gaining fat, it's water. And your body's learning to regulate aldosterone, vasopressin. And so eventually it's going to level out, but you go through that period where you're gaining weight rapidly, holding extra fullness and glycogen in water, and holding extra slop water, and if you're a guy who wants to be huge, that's awesome. If you're a girl, or also like the men's physique, or the guys who got into the sport because they wanted to look aesthetic, bro, those guys have a harder time usually. But they're also often bounded by weight limits for their height. So a lot of times you can't push them with the rebound. So it is really, but women tend to have the harder time with it because if you got into bodybuilding as a man to be huge, this is your time to be huge. You're never going to be this full and round. So it's fairly enjoyable. If you're a woman and you got into the sport, most women, I mean, I don't know why they but they don't probably all want to be like, I want to be a female bodybuilder, like they want to look strong, and it kind of evolves over time, like see how far they can take it. But they all still, I think it's all like guys, it's like, I want to get huge. With women, it's like, I want to look great and be muscular and be lean. And so you lose like a good chunk of that right out of the gate with the water.
Last year I went to go do, this is a really interesting experience. I went to schedule a photo shoot before Universe and had some car issues, wasn't able to make it down to Denver where I had the shoot scheduled, and I wasn't able to do it until after the show, after the 5 high days in a row with the cheat meals. And Dave will vouch for the fact that I'm a fat kid, and when we were in Charleston, I ate everything and anything, just because.
Danny is better than most male bodybuilders at eating.
Yeah. But I did a photo shoot 5 days after being in contest condition, where again, the feedback that I got from that show was that conditioning was by far and away some of the best that they'd seen, which again is a kudos to you, Justin. Going from that to 5 high days in a row, in teeny tiny clothes with the photographer, who I'm not someone who I'm like there's some women who can go in front of a camera and just be like super on point, like they're they pose really pretty and they're just very aesthetic. That's not me. That was a really interesting experience, and I remember messaging a couple of friends saying, I feel like I should not do the shoot because I'm bloated, I'm watery, I don't look good. And one of them was like, okay, you just got your pro card, like if nothing else you should be able to say, basically reframe it like this was kind of like your post pro, you've been there, and even if the pictures don't reflect that. Anyway, I'm clearly rambling, but it was hard. And I wouldn't say I'm someone who generally struggles a ton with body image. I don't say I ever really feel great about myself, but that was probably the first time I'd really experienced not wanting to be anywhere in front of a camera.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because I was still pretty lean.
It's also again like societal stuff as far as marketing. There's marketability, more room for marketability. So if David's like that is super bloated, we just don't do shirts. We don't do shirts. We do really heavy stuff, and there's a whole audience who
and he looks great in off season. And even now I'm sitting here and we're 6 weeks out, and I'm like, God, I got to be filming things now for the PT content. I got to be filming a whole bunch of things for the rest of the year, because the rest of the year as an off season female competitor, you just look average. You just look overweight, you look bloated. No one wants to look like you. No one wants to learn from you because they think, well, she just looks soft. She doesn't know what she's talking about. And it almost creates a sense of imposter syndrome if you're a female.
There's a good example of that, actually. Sorry to cut you off, but Mariusz Pudzianowski and Jill Mills.
Yeah.
Mariusz Pudzianowski was a ripped strongman competitor who everyone on earth knows. Jill Mills was the equal female version, a very lean as far as strong women are concerned, freaky strong, who no one knows because she was never shredded, And I always thought about that, no one knows Jill Mills. If she was Mariusz Pudzianowski.
Yeah.
But
she was by no means fat, right? She was still
but I'm saying she was
like
Mariusz Pudzianowski, but she wasn't lean. It's very she was probably what Danny looked like 5 days after the show, very full and round. There's just less marketability to that to women for whatever reason. It really stinks because that same look as a man is someone who builds a whole career and is worldwide famous from it.
Yeah.
I can think of a couple of other people who coach and are either chiropractors or PTs who have a little bit more reputation because they're big dudes who just look full year round. Where you take a female who might have a very comparable knowledge base or even more, but doesn't have the same doesn't have the same look. It's tough. I really feel for women in this industry, and the other side of that is I don't want to slay the body positivity and say it's a bad thing, but I do think it's important to kind of take both ends of the bell curve, and maybe if we could just fall somewhere in the middle. It'd be really great.
Yeah, yeah, unfortunately, well, that gets.
Well, you
the
have
body
daughters
positive-
too. I would love to know.
That gets.
You're cutting out, Justin.
None of the, am I here? Am I back now? Can you hear me now?
You're back now.
Okay.
Sort of, a little delayed.
Okay, well, sorry, let me know if I'm good. I'll start talking. The problem is like, none of it focuses on health, you know? It's not healthy to be obese. It's not. You're at risk for more types of cancer. Your lifespan is short, and you're at risk for diabetes. 50% of us are going to die of obesity related illnesses. I mean, that's just the fact. But it's, so that, like, I understand, like, that body positivity, the way it's gone with like health, like healthy at any size, is not true. You can be. It just becomes the probability that you're healthy decreases with new size. But on the other end, there's no focus. Like the good body has nothing to do with health either. It's just what's sexually appealing. So like the whole thing gets screwed up, and so neither side really has a proper argument is the problem.
I would love to hear, and I don't know if this is something you'd feel comfortable talking about, just having 4 daughters and obviously a wife too, kind of your thoughts on how do you approach female, gosh, I don't know. I don't want to say like psychology, but like, how do you approach that as someone who's pretty influential in this industry, knowing that your daughters are growing up watching and consuming what gets put out there right now?
Yeah, I think I don't even really know. We eat healthy. My wife's thin, she eats healthy. We make healthy choices. We just see. I grew up with an overweight family, and so I always that was always a discussion. Wanting to lose weight, not liking how we looked, eating terrible food, being jealous of people that look good, where like I didn't realize that there was another option to that. And my wife's family isn't that way. They're not overweight. They just don't eat bad food. They don't eat out ever. They don't eat fast food ever. My wife when we met, she had never been to McDonald's in her entire life. I still don't think she's ever been to like a Taco Bell I mean, we never go. And so, and I don't think like those things weren't really, it's hard to explain. It's like somehow if you just like don't make food a focus and just eat health, it seems like they just missed it, I think. I mean, it helps that, I mean, we do eat healthy, and all my daughters are well, obviously I'm biased, but they're very beautiful, and so I don't think they have to worry about that, I guess. But I think like for me, it was, if I was a female, I would have had massive image issues. And it was because my family's overweight. We didn't know anything, but like, I just thought it was like magic. Like people got lucky that they looked good, going back to like realizing with weight training that I could change things about myself. And so it was like, we don't talk about it. Like when I was a kid, that's all my parents talked about, like any like thin female or, it was always about people's weight or wanting to lose weight or going on a diet or this thing failed, where we've never had that because we both eat healthy, I mean, what's funny is I'm the unhealthy eater of the home,
That is funny.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, but compare, like my wife, like I still enjoy a good cheat meal. My wife thinks they're gross. She just never.
I was going to ask you, do you have a favorite cheat meal?
It's been so long since I dieted that like it's all off-season cheat meals, where it's almost like after I'm like, yeah.
Like, did I really need that?
It wasn't even that good.
What was the go?
Mine are lame. Mine's almost always pad thai, peanut curry, or sushi, and then like pizza. But pizza would be like, I'm supposed to eat whatever I want tonight. I don't.
You can't even enjoy it because it's not good for you.
Yeah, and it's like, well, the kids have people over. Let's just get pizza. And I'm like, I would rather just eat my food.
I was going to ask you what your go-to cheat meal was when you were your most competitive, but I think I remember asking you something about it in a check-in one time. And you basically told me that you pretty much just eat enough pizza and ice cream to make your insides hurt.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I mean, I used to remember some really big ones, but well, I didn't have celiac back then, or I think I might have because I would get like violently ill after cheat meals. But so I mean, I can't really even enjoy that much anymore. But yeah, God, pizza. I get pizza and wings, like ranch,
Oh,
pizza
ranch.
rolls. Oh
Man, you
man.
know you're from the Midwest when you can just guzzle ranch from
Oh
water.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
Chili
hear that.
dogs. Oh God, actually, now that I think about it, yeah, chili dogs. I don't know what it is. Oh, everyone else see, like my wife would never eat a hot dog because she thinks they're gross, and they are. But like I don't eat hot dogs because I know how high fat they are. I think they are amazing.
Tasty.
Like oh, like a chili dog, chili
Justin,
cheese dog.
I grew up eating like frozen dinners. My family can't cook for shit. Dave's family and Dave's mom in particular is a phenomenal cook, and so Dave learned a whole bunch from her. But I grew up eating like frozen dinners, so we have our cheat meals now where Dave busts out like this homemade everything. He's going through all these like fancy processes, and I'm like, oh my god, I love food. I think that's
With
why.
seasoning other than salt.
Yeah, exactly. We didn't
Technically,
use
the
salt
technically
growing up, though.
the word seasoning actually only pertains to salt, but that's just me.
Oh, see, yeah. I would
um,
actually like while it's on my thought process is like when I first started dating my wife, I was really intrigued because all I knew was my family and my extended family, which are all like we're just big people. You know, I mean, I've been big since I was like since the day after puberty hit, basically, and all the men are really big. The women are pretty big also, and so like when we had like family events, it revolved around food, you know. And so I was always curious, like, is it just my family? Like, you know? But so I went to my like first started going to some like family events with my wife's family, and I realized that theirs revolved around food as well. But there was a very, very big difference. My family, like you go over for some holiday or some whatever, and you got everyone at someone's house, all along the table there were chips and dip, always, all kinds of chips, all kinds of dips, and there'd be like a bowl of like M&Ms, peanut M&Ms, bowl candy, you know, and we'd like order pizza. And so the whole event was around food, and those were the foods, like just terrible foods. Well, you go to my wife's for like a holiday, or it's the exact same thing. Only their table would be like crackers and cheese and like a homemade apple pie, you know. And we went to order pizza, they would cook like a big elaborate meal. And so it's still all revolved around food. It was just homemade stuff. It's not like apple pie is healthy, but we would have cheesecake, you know, from a store. Apple pie, homemade apple pie is going to have less calories than cheesecake. We would have, you know, chips and dip, you know, like French onion dip, which, you know, they would have crackers and cheese, which is still like a lot of calories, but crackers and cheese are lower calorie and healthier than chips. You know, they would cook a big meal, like, I don't know, pasta, which isn't good for you. It's not like low calorie, but it's better than, you know, sausage pizza. And I realized like theirs was always like home cooked stuff. And it's really, I mean, and that kind of like a society in general, you know, like if you look at pictures of people from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, before there was fast food and takeout and a whole restaurant culture, and when people just cook their own food, that's all it takes. And it seems crazy, but like, I think we've talked about this before, maybe I did in a book, but like the average American only gains 1 pound during the holidays, you know, they just never lose it, you know. And so if you're 60 years old, you've had, you know, 45 holidays past puberty, that's 45 pounds, which is about what most people gain, you know. And then over the summer months, they'll go to barbecues and cookouts and, you know, drink beer during the day, and they'll gain another pound in the summer. That's it. But that 2 pounds a year over 40 years, that's 80 pounds of body fat. And that's really all it is. And the difference is that those small differences, people who cook their own food, you know, because 100 calorie a day difference, which the difference between apple pie and cheesecake is at least 100 calories. The difference between crackers and cheese and Ruffles and French onion dip is 100 calories. The difference between homemade pasta and pizza is 100 calories. 100 calories a day is 10 pounds a year. You know, if you're 60 years old, 10 pounds a year is 600 pounds. So really, it's a small thing, but I don't remember how we got on that, but that was what like the biggest thing I noticed was, and I think hopefully my kids get that because we've like no one knows what a diet is or anything, you know. I mean, they know like if I'm eating for something, but it's not like I'm not like dieting, I'm eating for a purpose, like I have an event or
That's so good. Yeah.